Good evening, everyone. My name is Robert Ganzamore, and I'm Conservation Agriculture Lead at ShareScreen Africa. I'm very, very happy to be your host this evening, and Diane Momararungu, who is on your screen, is my co-host, and we are very, very happy to host you tonight. And to kick off our session tonight, we are very privileged to have with us a seasoned expert in agriculture mechanization. He's called John Bosco Talemwa. He's an agricultural mechanization lecturer at the Rwanda Institute for Conservation Agriculture. Before that, he worked as a mechanization extensionist at the Ministry of Agriculture and Rwanda Agriculture Board by supporting technology transfer for smallholder farmers. A very fun fact about John Bosco Talemwa is that since 2012, he has trained 500 agronomists, technicians, tractor operators, and farmers by extending knowledge in agricultural mechanization. His talk tonight is going to be titled Mechanizing for Small Farms, Making Technology Work in Sustainable Farming. Good evening, sir. Good evening again.
Good evening, Robert.
We are going to do this a little bit different. We're going to be creative a little bit different. Our audience are used to presentations, PowerPoint presentations, but we want to give them a break of slides and all. We want to have a one-on-one conversation, and maybe later we can also give them a chance to ask their questions. So my first question to you tonight is in this topic of mechanizing for small farms, why does mechanization really matter for a smallholder farmer, someone who has his shovel? Why should he or she care about mechanizing for his farm? And maybe if you can use Rwanda's context, because most of us are from Rwanda, but also you can extend and look at the African continent as general.
Thank you, Robert. One context we have to understand is that mechanization covers the whole value chain of crop production. That's from field preparation up to post-harvest. And for Rwanda's case, majority of the farmers are smallholder farmers. And we find that during the peak season, labor is scarce because almost every farmer is rushing to prepare their own fields. If it's time for harvesting, everyone is taking care of their own farms. If it's crop management, same thing. And that's where mechanization comes in and it becomes very important. You find that even when majority of farmers in the sub-Saharan Africa have small plots, but the timeliness of operation is kind of affected if they are still relying on manual labor. You find that it takes more time, for example, to prepare the field, to plant, and across all the operations. And in the end, the time wasted, the timeliness, we find that there are losses accompanying that time lost, or a lot of time spent during that operation. So in such cases, in addition, the timeliness, the efficiency of work, also we have the shortage of laborers. Most of the African countries are now getting industrialized. So most of even those who have been providing the labor support for farm operations are moving to the other work in the factories and leaving that gap. So we have also labor shortages. And that's where the mechanization comes in that would perform the operations within a short time, also with efficiency. Basically, that's why mechanization is important even for smallholder farmers.
Yeah. Yeah, I think I understand. I understand where it comes from, because so many of the stories is that for a parent back in the village, his or her first labor their kids. And looking at what the kids are doing as of now, there are schools everywhere, they are doing their education, and simply makes it very difficult for those parents to have people to be in their farms. So looking at the smallholder farmers, I think what you just said about shortage of labor, it makes total sense. And one question, maybe for the context, maybe for even other countries, if we are talking about a small farm, how big or how small is that? If you are talking about a smallholder farmer, how many hectares or how many acres are we talking about?
When it comes to smallholder farmers, I think it varies from region to region.
Mm,
For the case of sub-Saharan Africa, you find that most smallholder farmers have less than 1 hectare. But
mm,
maybe in the southern and the northern Africa, you find that a smallholder farmer may have maybe even up to 5 hectares, between 1 and 5. So it varies depending on the region. But
yeah,
the big part of Africa, which is the sub-Saharan Africa, most smallholder farmers have
mm,
slightly less than 1 hectare. And
yeah,
for, I think, East African case, it's even less than half a hectare, most of the
mm,
smallholder farmers. So, but it varies within that range.
mm. Yeah, I think there's a bit of injustice in that. Looking at there's Johan on the screen as well. He's in the audience. Looking at his farm, if he comes to Rwanda, he can be a large scale farmer. But back in South Africa, he's a small scale farmer. I think for East Africans, there's a bit of injustice that is being done to us, but we will look at how we can use the small size we have. Going to another question. Many people think mechanization means big machines, um, very big tractors, sophisticated center pivots and all. But what does appropriate mechanization look like for a small farm?
Now, coming back to what we started with, mechanizing across the value chain, but with the appropriate scale technologies. The appropriate mechanization in this case, I think, would refer to that technology or the equipment that can be used or fit within the small size farms.
Mm,
That's for the case of the primary production.
mm,
But also when it comes to the harvesting and post-harvesting operations. Now,
mm,
that there comes another context of appropriate scale, an equipment that is affordable to the smallholder farmers, that
mm,
is easy to operate and also easy to maintain. Repair, maybe in that case, you might call in a trained mechanic, but there are daily and routine maintenance that a farmer or an operator could also perform. So in that case, an appropriate equipment should also be easy to operate and easy to
mm,
maintain by the farmer, but also cost effective, an equipment that
mm,
is beneficial to the farmer rather than leaving a farmer maybe in a debt, but also in addition to increasing production, saves a lot of time for the farmer to do other equipment, but also cost effective and in some cases that can also generate some revenues. So if you can have an
mm,
equipment or a technology that fits within the small farms, but also generate revenues, easy to operate, as well
mm,
as cost effective. That's what I can define as an appropriate
mm,
scale mechanization for smallholders.
mm. I think you just talked about revenues, and I think every farmer does farming for with the sole purpose of generating revenues. And looking at how agricultural mechanization can generate more revenues as compared to usual subsistence farming. My question is, what are barriers limiting smallholder farmers in adopting this agriculture mechanization? Is it cost, like you said, is it skills, or is it the mindset these farmers possess?
All the three have proven to be barriers to adoption of mechanization.
Mm,
But the biggest one that has hindered adoption is the cost. If you look at our
mm,
small holder farmers, one, they cannot afford owning or purchasing their own equipment. But maybe we shall discuss on that. Sometimes it's not might not be relevant to own an equipment. There is another way of using uh, mechanization without direct ownership. So the
mm,
cost has hindered that for smallholders. Most of them cannot afford. But also we find that most smallholder farmers are not well trained to
mm,
operate the equipment safely. They receive, maybe even those who acquire the equipment, they receive a few days of training by maybe the supplier, and they
mm,
lack that technical skills to operate it safely, and sometimes
mm,
it might cause some trouble. In
mm,
regard to mindset, yes, it's also another challenge to adoption.
mm,
Uh, One, most smallholder farmers still think that mechanization is large equipment that are meant
mm,
for bigger sized farms,
mm,
forgetting that mechanization is across the value chain. And there are
mm,
those small equipments like the two-wheel tractors that have adaptable tools and attachments, motorized,
mm,
for example, sprayers that are more
mm,
or less the backpack but with that are motorized, and other small tools that can reduce the burden and the back breaking gradually. So the
mm,
perception of mechanization being the four-wheel tractors and maybe for big size farms has also hindered the adoption. And mainly this is due to lack of information on appropriate scale mechanization that can be used by the smallholders as well.
mm. Yeah. Maybe while we are still on that, it might be someone in the audience who is looking forward to maybe owning um a two-wheel tractor or a motorized sprayer, just like you said. And then you also mentioned that direct ownership is not always the only option. There's an option where you can not directly own a machine, but then you can use it for your endeavors. If you can talk about how that indirect ownership works, just to while we're still on this, if you can talk about this indirect ownership.
With reference to Rwanda's case, Rwanda has promoted cooperative kind of management of farming activities. So you find that most of the farmers in the regions are encouraged to work in cooperatives. So
Mm,
in such a scenario, cooperatives, you find hundreds or thousands of farmers come together to contribute and share the burden of acquiring an equipment. And the other part is land use consolidation. So under cooperative, farmers who have come together consolidate their land. So the
mm,
small fragmented plots, we have a few case studies in Rwanda where you find 2,000 farmers with less than hectare consolidate their land, and you find they use the big infrastructures of irrigation, they can use big machinery. So in such cases, they share the burden of ownership of the equipment. So one is the cooperative, but also the group ownership. Even without a cooperative, farmers in the same area can come together and form a group and acquire an equipment that would share the
mm,
burden of ownership. But there is also a popular model of hiring. You find there are companies that or individuals that own a series of equipment across the value chain. And what a farmer does is just to schedule and hire a specific equipment for a specific operation and only pays the maybe per hectare or per uh, ton of produce threshed or harvested, something like that. So you find a farmer does not own an equipment, but can access the equipment through the hiring mechanisms. There are other approaches. We have, most of us know about the model operated by Hero Tractor. It's kind of a lease to own,
Mm,
and it's a farmer pays as they operate. So you pay per area you have operated, you can lease the equipment and then pay as you work. So rather than
mm,
having a burden of purchasing an equipment, you can lease an equipment and you pay as you service, you get revenues,
mm,
but also pay the loan. So there are other models that have been adopted in Africa, including the machinery models that I
mm,
think in Rwanda and some other regions and Kenya, where you find a group of farmers coming together to, yeah, acquire and operate equipment. So there are other models rather than direct ownership by an individual farmer.
mm. Yeah, I think um, for the most of audience, if you talk about agriculture cooperative or leasing, they're straightforward terms that they can understand. And if anyone in the audience wants to look forward to doing agriculture mechanization, these two forms can help a lot. Now, last week we were talking about how agriculture mechanization can coexist with conservation agriculture, and it's a debate that is ongoing now and maybe in the near future is going to be there. In your perspective, what forms of mechanization align best with conservation agriculture principles, or is it even something that can coexist with conservation agriculture really?
Yeah, that's, I think, a big debate across the continent because conservation agriculture is relatively new in our region, but it's something that can coexist. The main conservation agriculture has a lot of principles, but the main ones are three, as we may know, and two of them, which is the minimum soil disturbance and maintaining the soil cover. Those ones are always the debate whether mechanization can minimize soil disturbance, or maybe if the air soil cover, maybe the residues are left on the soil surface, can mechanization leave the residues intact? Yes, it can. It's something that we have tried and many other countries have been trying, but it comes to appropriately designed equipment. For minimum soil disturbance, their equipment, one, first we need to change the perception that field land preparation is tillage,
Mm,
where you turn the soil and in the end you are causing soil degradation and erosion. We have specialized attachments like
mm,
reapers, like mowers, that we can use and then later use no-till planters to leave the residues. And the planters are also well designed so that they have residue management tools. The conventional planters, if you use them with the soils that have residues, you may end
mm,
up dragging them out of the field. But we have a few tools on our campus that are designed for CA. For example, if you're planting, the planter should be a no-till, a minimum till. It can only till where it's planting and leaving the rest of the soil surface intact. If you have residues, rather than dragging them, a planter is specialized to only slit or cut the line where it's planting, and we have residue managers. For
Mm.
smallholders, for small plots, we have the jab planters that are sharp enough to drop the seeds without tilling the field, and many other tools. Yes,
Mm.
it's been confirmed that mechanization can coexist with the conservation agriculture. You leave the soil undisturbed as well as leaving the residues on top of the soil intact. So it's
Yeah.
possible.
Yeah, I think I can understand um where it's going, but then to to understand it fully, I would like to know in what circumstances does agriculture mechanization become harmful to the soil, if I can put it that way. Because yes, you're talking about using no-till planters, but you can talk about the circumstances in which agriculture mechanization become harmful, and maybe some of the mechanized tools that are harmful to the soil, just to make it clear to the audience.
Yes, coming back to conservation agriculture, the intention is to minimize the soil disturbance, to leave it, to make the soil regenerate and maintain the nutrients. Over tillage of the soil, uh, using the tillage implements, one exposes your field to erosion, either wind erosion, runoff, and so on, and you lose all the nutrients, and the topsoil is washed away. So any equipment that leaves the soil bare and causes erosion, that means that mechanization is harmful to the environment. Two, any equipment that is oversized. For example, we are talking of smallholder farmers with less than a hectare, and you bring an equipment, for example, an equipment plant that is meant for 500 hectares. It's oversized and it will end up becoming a burden to the farmer. That may be considered harmful because one, it's not appropriate. Uh, Operating the equipment, be it from field preparation to post-harvest equipment, without proper training on the safety, that mechanization might be considered harmful because we have seen several operators of different equipment that have been harmed by equipment, and basically it's due to lack of safety training on operation. Also, you find that some farmers have equipment, but they lack maybe uh, technicians to maintain them. They invest a lot, but the equipment end up maybe broken down and they have no repair services. So that mechanization is not helpful to a farmer. So any mechanization in that context might be maybe considered inappropriate or harmful because it's not that useful to the user or the farmer.
Mm. Yeah, I think I can understand. And something that really piqued my interest is um lack of skills or trainings in how farmers can use these tools. And this brings me to a question of, from your experience in your bio, I saw that you've trained over 500 agri- farmers, agronomists, and maybe I can say individuals involved in agriculture, mechanization, just to not miss anyone. So from those people that you've worked with, what are skills gap that you've noticed that farmers should look out for? What skills gap do you consistently observe among these farmers?
I think, first of all, by now, I think I've trained more than 1,000.
Yes,
I think the
yes,
500
definitely,
was like 5 years back.
definitely.
Yeah, because now including more than 500 students and farmers. So
Yeah.
yeah, I've worked with a lot of farmers, technicians, agronomists, and students who eventually become farmers or agronomists.
Mm,
And the biggest gap is one on the safety operation, like I earlier said. The equipment that are used in mechanization across the value chains, most of them are that expensive, but also dangerous. If
mm,
used appropriately, they can last for years, but if misused or used without proper training,
mm,
apart from harming the operator, they might not last that long.
mm,
One of the skills gap is on the proper operation, safety on the operation of the equipment, as well as the maintenance of the equipment. You
mm,
find most farmers or operators of the equipment just operate without looking, one, at the safety of the operator, two, at the safety of the equipment on the appropriate operation. And in the end, the equipment might not last longer, even leave alone if maybe the operator is lucky not to be harmed. But the biggest skill gap is on the safe operation and maintenance of most of the equipment across the value chain. And if that's
mm,
solved, uh, like there is a consistent training, then we can have the equipment that operated safely but also can work for a longer period.
mm. Yeah. Well, I think from what you just said, um, I think we can all agree there's a need for government incentives and policies to make that happen. And from the fact that you worked with the Ministry of Agriculture and Rwanda Agriculture Board, w- what incentives as of 2025, what incentives and policies do you think can be put in place to tackle all those skills gap, maybe cost-wise issues? What incentives and policies should the government, not necessarily government of Rwanda, but also some other governments across Africa should look out for?
Most governments are shifting from a mechanization that is led by the government to a
Mm,
mechanization subsector that is led by the private sector
mm,
but regulated by the government. And for a private sector to uh, come in mechanization, there should be a good environment for investment, but as
mm,
well as that demand. So some of the policies and strategies, one, we are dealing with smallholder farmers to reduce the cost, one, of acquisition or hiring, incentives including the tax exemptions, either on the importation of the equipment or maybe the other uh, tax taxes that are levied on other goods. So in most cases, we find smallholders are not farming for business. So it's if the taxes are exempted, it becomes affordable.
mm,
Uh, some other maybe policies, mechanizing on small holders or on
mm,
small farms is slightly costly compared to mechanizing large farms. So some of the
mm,
policies that favor mechanization is the land use policy, land use
mm,
consolidation policy. You find that even in Rwanda, where we have majority of the smallholders, the few who
mm,
have consolidated their areas can easily afford mechanization and they can
mm,
mechanize easily. So the land use
mm,
consolidation policy, a policy that would work to favor mechanization and make it affordable.
mm,
I think the last one is on the extension.
mm,
We understand that the perception has been of the farmers that mechanization is for the bigger farms. Mechanization
Mm.
is tractors, which is not the case. If mechanization is embedded in the extension policies, so that the farmers, smallholder farmers, are aware of the different value chains that can be mechanized. A
Mm.
smallholder farm might not mechanize planting or maybe land preparation, but can mechanize harvesting or maybe threshing or maybe sharing. So,
Mm.
making mechanization as part of the extension policies would also enhance adoption of mechanization by smallholder farmers.
Mm. Yeah, I, I totally agree. Um, Maybe for the case of Rwanda, you talked about one of the policies that should be looked out for is land use consolidation program. But if you look at the terrain of our country, it's more hilly, not really favorable to to consolidate the land and also use these mechanization tools. But I know there might be some agricultural mechanization tools that can be used in a terrain that is very hilly. So if you can talk about that first, our terrain and what should be done, and also the tools that can be used to farm that landscape.
I think Rwanda is a bit unique in the region, like you said, because of the hill landscape.
Mm.
But we find that even on the hills, for farmers to be able to farm on the hillsides, they develop the terraces. We have a lot of tools, like I said, across the value chain.
Mm.
If it comes maybe to the field preparation, you can have the two-wheel tractors. You know them, you can
Mm.
have different attachments and they can be moved across. You
Mm.
have the jab planters, you have the push planters,
Mm.
sometimes that are not powered. When it
Mm.
comes to maybe crop protection, you can have powered backpack sprayers that can
Mm.
help within a short time and reduce the drudgery.
Mm.
Then mechanization is sometimes of farm. You can harvest on the hillsides, but maybe you have a storage facility, but you have
Mm.
shaders, you have threshers. That's also part of mechanization. Rather than doing it on farm, you can move the harvest and then including transportation, you can use those small equipment like two-wheel with trailers to transport. Mechanization is across the value chain. So basically,
Mm.
even on the hillsides, even with hill landscape, you can mechanize across the value chain. But sometimes you may fail to mechanize the land preparation, but you can mechanize the transportation and the post-harvest, including shearing and threshing and maybe drying. So it's possible.
Mm. Yeah, yeah. I think it's very understandable, and something that you might have talked about, and I might have missed it. Very sorry, but for a better understanding, what are some of the low cost but very promising techniques in agriculture mechanization that you believe can transform smallholder productivity? What are those? If I have a low budget and I'm looking out for um, mechanizing my farm, what do you think are the low cost but very promising agriculture techniques or tools I can use?
When it comes to low cost tools, yeah, we have the hand tools that are not powered, but one, they can reduce the drudgery, but also they give you, they improve the efficiency. For
Mm.
example, even the small powered tools, like the backpack sprayers that are powered, they're not
Mm.
that expensive and they can, someone who is using the conventional backpack that is hand powered, maybe might work for 2 hours and that's all because of fatigue. But the powered one, which is not that expensive, can work maybe even for the whole day, just walking around. It's powered.
mm,
But also we have improved hand shaders. We have jab planters that can plant and apply fertilizer at the same time. They are not powered,
mm,
they are simple tools. We also have the tool tractors that can work around of different models. So there are a lot of hand tools, including we also have powered, but also some shaders and threshers of for small holders are not that expensive. They can be affordable,
mm,
especially if maybe one or two farmers come together. But also
mm,
putting in mind that for we are now nowadays talking about sustainable agriculture mechanization.
mm,
Using the equipment, if you own the equipment, it's not for only using on your farm or for your own operations. Complete your
mm,
operations within a short time and then you can uh, provide services for the neighboring farmers. So in that
mm,
case, it's like you get also revenues and an equipment that is even slightly expensive can become affordable because it generates revenues. So
mm.
basically, that's a bit of the low cost equipment.
Yeah. Well, I think from what you just said, I got that partnership in terms of agriculture mechanization is key. You continuously talked about land consolidation, coming together, forming cooperatives. I think if we are looking out for mechanizing our farms, however small they are, um, I think partnership is key. As we go forward, we are towards the end of a one-on-one conversation. Maybe for the audience, if you can raise your hands and ask your questions, and if you can't, you can also type it into the chat box, and I can read it for you. But as you are thinking about it, I would like to ask one final question. If, as you have been in agriculture mechanization, I don't know for how many years, very
Since
looking at your bio,
2011.
2011. Wow, six, no, is it, are we talking about 14 years? What one misconception would you like people to let go of? Misconception about agriculture mechanization, something um, that really is a pain to you. What do you think should people let go?
I think the biggest misconception in most cases when you talk about agricultural mechanization, farmers or people think of a tractor and a
Mm,
four-wheel tractor.
mm,
And when they think of a tractor, they think of tillage, a
mm,
tractor in the field tilling. So the misconception is about not understanding mechanization.
mm,
So maybe mechanization even is not limited to the use of the equipment. We have been discussing the use of mechanization across the value chain, but mechanization is beyond that.
mm,
Someone selling the equipment is part of the mechanization. Someone in extension promoting mechanization is part of the mechanization. Someone
mm,
providing the services may not be a farmer, but is hiring farmers around, providing them with services. A mechanic that is providing the services for repair and maintenance is part of the mechanization ecosystem. So the misconception that when you talk of mechanization, it's a big tractor in
mm,
the field, maybe tilling. That's the only misconception, but that everyone maybe should get rid of and understand that mechanization covers one, when we talk of the equipment,
mm,
is across the farm operations, the value chains, but
mm,
goes beyond that, providing the services, extension.
Mm.
Like this program that you're conducting is mechanization because it's putting across an information that is helping farmers, everyone understand about mechanization, appropriate equipment. So that's
Mm.
mechanization. So the perception of the big equipment, a tractor in the field, pulverizing the field, that
Mm.
should be rid of.
Yeah, I think it makes sense, and thank you for crediting us with the skills in agriculture mechanization. I think we can now say Share Screen Africa is part of agriculture mechanization and will be doing no harm at all. So if anyone from the audience has a question, this is your time to ask. You can raise your hand, your virtual hand. You can unmute yourself if you want to, or you can even type it into the chat box and ask directly to our speaker. Maybe as we are still waiting for the questions to come, I can ask Mr. John Bosco to elaborate more on agriculture mechanization vis-a-vis the value chain in agriculture, going beyond the day-to-day farming. If you are talking about distribution, if you are talking about food processing, if you are talking about post-harvest handling, what is the involvement of mechanization tools in all that? If I am having a website that sells agricultural produce, if I am having a warehouse of which I store my harvest just to fight post-harvest losses, what's your take on agriculture mechanization tools beyond just tractors, sprayers? Drones are now a very good topic in agriculture mechanization. What's your take beyond the usual farm endeavors that we see on a daily basis?
Yeah, yes, like we talked about it earlier. Uh, when we say agriculture mechanization, and there are about maybe four components. One is the use of the technologies, be it from the tractors, maybe from field preparation, crop production, the harvesters, then you go to post-harvesting, the threshers, the dryers. That's the use of the technologies. The other side is the manufacture. Those who are manufacturing the equipment. We're now talking about the mechanization ecosystem. It's kind of a chain that one cannot exist without the other. We start from maybe manufacturing, but we're used to the utilization of the equipment in the field. But it all starts from where it's manufactured. The manufacturer makes the different equipment, and now it comes to the supply chain. We have those that are dealing, the dealers that sell, that have the warehouses, that sell the equipment. And then that's where we come to the utilization that we have all been calling mechanization in the field. Now, if there is no extension, then the farmer will never understand the proper technology, the importance of mechanization, the value chains that the equipment can perform, because most farmers, like we said, think that mechanization is a tractor in the field, but it's beyond that. So extension also is part of the mechanization ecosystem.
Mm.
Those who understand or learn about the technologies, and then through either field demonstration, training in the field, information, training the farmers, pass the information of appropriate technologies. And the second last one are the service providers, the mechanics, the operators. You have the equipment, but you need the mechanics to keep the equipment in good health, to give you the number of hours that are needed for the equipment. For example, the equipment perform without breakdown across the season and maybe across the year. You need operators that are well trained, because an equipment in the field, or even if it's a thresher, if it's not well operated, if an operator is not well trained, that equipment will break down. And I think the last component of the mechanization ecosystem are the policy makers, the government. Those appropriate policies that would favor the adoption of mechanization. And the policies the government can implement for maybe that consolidation that we earlier asked about, the tax exemptions, maybe the good working environment that can enable farmers and the other actors operate well without any hindrance. So basically the ecosystem, if that ecosystem is well linked, then yeah, we have agriculture mechanization that is well operating.
Yes. Someone just sent me a question, and it's an interesting one. I think it's in the chat box. It's asking, if you have a half hectare in a hilly country like Rwanda or East Africa in general, which crops would you consider and which role could mechanization play?
I'm not an expert in agronomy, but I believe that the crop will also be determined by the region.
Mhm.
For example, in Rwanda, in most hilly areas, you find it's mostly rain and it's cold. So, like any crop that maybe agronomists may recommend, what we know that we have the technologies that are appropriate for each crop value chain and
Mhm.
across the farm operations. Sometimes we have been, when I was still working with RAB, we would find it challenging, even for small equipment that have the engines to move them across the terraces. But such farmers, if you fail to mechanize the field preparation, for example, if you planted maybe maize, then you can opt for spraying. You reduce the drudgery of crop protection. You can have a powered equipment that you put on the back, but it's motorized. You can have simple shearers, smaller ones, to reduce the
Mhm.
burden of shearing with hands.
Mhm.
We have the simple tools that can mechanize any crop. So in for half a hectare in Rwanda, it depends on the region, and because I think most of the crops grow well across the country, but in most areas in Rwanda, it's maize, beans, and sometimes maybe in the northern Irish potatoes. So we can, yes, it can be mechanized. Appropriate tools exist.
We have a hand from Inyas de Loyola. If you can unmute yourself and ask your question.
So thank you very much. First of all, I would like to thank Share Screen Africa for this discussion. Also, thanks my professor, Mr. John Bosco, for delivering such impactful advice for us as we are interested in agriculture mechanization for smallholder farmers. So my question is, referring to Rwandan context and your experience in sustainable agriculture mechanization, which part of value chain should be focused for when you want to invest, like directly in mechanization? Which is the best value chain you should look at? And also, what characteristics should be focused on while choosing the appropriate tool to make that value chain you choose more productive? Thank you.
Thank you, Deloyola. Two questions on one. The part of value chain. If you want to become maybe a service provider and you're looking for an entry point, based on my experience, previously it's like most farmers have been mechanizing the part of land preparation, and most of the service providers have been using that as their entry point on field preparation. But we realize that most farmers are now being informed about conservation agriculture, and some of them are shifting from land preparation now to the minimum tillage using maybe no-till planters and the other parts. So the value chain, one, there is a thing that existed. You mechanize the crop production part, but then you experience challenges with post-harvest. You have a higher production, but then you fail to manage that because of lack of appropriate post-harvest equipment. So I believe maybe that's an area that have been overlooked, the post-harvest mechanization part. If that would be an entry point to maybe to start with. The other question on the selection of appropriate technologies. One, if you have identified your entry point, the value chain that you want to start with, for example, let's say you want to acquire equipment for post-harvest, like threshers, let's say shearers. So the first thing I think appropriate technologies means one, the equipment that are not oversized or undersized for your target group. If your target farmers have a maximum of 1 hectare and less, then the size of the equipment should match the land size or the production. Previously, we had, when I was still working with RAB, the government imported mobile dryers, and each of the dryers had a capacity of 10 tons. So during our extension program, we would visit rice farmers. Rice farmers are in a cooperative, and we find they have over maybe 2,000 hectares. So from the view, you think those farmers maybe have thousands of tons, and it's an appropriate area to exhibit that equipment that has a capacity of 10 tons. But arriving there, the challenge was most of the farmers could not produce 10 tons, and that required us to convince them to combine their produce. Now, convincing 4 farmers in a short time to combine the rice harvested from the small plots so that you can use a dryer, it was not that easy. So I bring this when identifying appropriate equipment. One is about the target farmers, an equipment that fits the small scale. If they are medium holder farmers, then you select an equipment of a medium size. It should not be oversized, not undersized, because if it's oversized, then, for example, that dry of with a capacity of 10 tons, you cannot put 1 ton and it works. It does not. It might spoil actually, it might end up frying the rice rather than drying the rice. So you look at the target farmers, but also cost effective. If you purchase an equipment that is too expensive for you, even when you want to provide the services, because you have to recoup your investment, that means you will overcharge the farmers. Smallholder farmers will not. So the appropriate equipment, you also look at the target farmers, and the equipment should be affordable. Even the services offered to those farmers should be affordable in their category. I think basically that's it when selecting an appropriate equipment.
Right. We have a question in the chat box from Emmanuel Shinjiro. He asked, through Mr. Talemwa's experience, what is the confidence for farmers to adopt mechanization within next 5 years, specifically in Rwanda?
In Rwanda, maybe going back, mechanization started in 2010. But then it was the government providing the services, be it leasing, hiring, and selling. But the main target was to develop the understanding of the farmers, to increase the awareness. And as of now, mechanization is, I think, 100% run by the private sector. The government is just providing the policy support. So if I look in the next 5 years, with the platforms that have come up, supported by the Ministry of Agriculture, the adoption rate is kind of increasing. Also, the government is promoting the land use consolidation, because if you are to invest in irrigation schemes, then the farmers have to be under the land use consolidation. We have a lot of projects coming up in Rwanda. And because of a few that started earlier, where a few regions, farmers come together, consolidate their land, and the government installs irrigation infrastructure. So the farmers are learning from their colleagues that if you consolidate your area, you can afford to use irrigation systems. It will be affordable to use mechanization. So because of learning from their fellow farmers and the extension program that has been enhanced, I believe in the next 5 years, more than 50% of the farmers will have adopted mechanization, at least in one of their farm operations.
Right. I just realized that we're doing our audience injustice by making this discussion a male-centered discussion. And I would like to invite my colleague Diane Momarongo to ask some other questions and also bring our event to a closure. Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Robert. And I want to say thank you to Dr. John Bosco. Thank you so much for an interesting conversation and sharing your experience in what is happening in mechanization. And I think I would say you gave us a pretty much picture on how even the government is trying their best to help the farmers by subsidizing some of the tools. You mentioned about how farmers join together and the government try to set an irrigation system for farmers, and I think we can appreciate that. And it's really doing a lot, but I think it can never be enough for us to have a modernized agriculture. And as someone who would want to come in the side of being a stakeholder, at the end of the day, even though the government can try to implement policies that is the process of modernizing agriculture, but even if it would try to modernize some tools and machines, but I believe even stakeholders can come in as business people or as in NGOs. And my question is about if I am a young person, and for example, someone who is from Lika, or has been taught by you or anyone from UR for University of Rwanda or any other country, since Africa is around Africa, and I'm thinking of starting or investing in mechanization. What are some advice would you give them as someone who's been experienced? And what are some of the challenges that you think they need to think about twice before they start investment?
I think some time back when we were trying to convince the private sector to come in mechanization, maybe I'll give the same advice that we were giving them based on our experience.
Mm.
Yeah, one, looking at our agricultural landscape of the smallholder farmers and looking at the youth coming in to invest in mechanization. So the advice is to start with small equipment, maybe a few. I've seen some service providers that start with one tractor, and maybe at the end of 5 years they have even about 10. So start with a few equipment, start with small equipment, and learn, understand the target farmers. The more you are engaged, you start with an equipment, then you engage with farmers, you understand what else that you need to invest in, what operation. Earlier, I think it's the Loyola, if I'm not mistaken, who asked about the entry point. When, for example, you start with field preparation equipment, then you later understand that, yeah, I need to invest in post-harvest equipment. So you start small and then you understand your farmers, what they need, the appropriate tools, and then you can grow with time. I think basically that's what I would advise.
Thank you, thank you. I think you said it well. Start small, learn the market as you figure out other entry point. I think that's the best way you can start in, and the best thing is to study your market, learn with your farmers and see what they need. And thank you so much for that answer. I think you gave a detailed and clear answer to it. There's more of also a feedback. I will just read it at the same time. It's from Ms. Erotopista. She's saying, thank you so much all for your engaging evening and good topics, as well as Cultivate Africa. Thank you, Topist, for that. And moving on to the question is about, in many farming communities, women represent a large share of the agriculture workforce. Yet most machinery is designed without considering their physical needs and safety. From your experience, what specific design innovations or engineering approaches can help make mechanization more gender responsive, particularly in terms of reducing weight, improving agronomics? I don't know. I was typing error, but I think we get it. And enhancing safety so that women farmers can operate equipment comfortably and effectively.
It's been, I think it's been also, maybe I can call it some perception
Mm.
that the equipment have been understood to be operated by men or the male, but something that most of you have gone through RICA understand better, that actual equipment can be operated by anyone. Yes, maybe previously the farm machinery will come to the tractors were too mechanical and rigid. But nowadays the equipment that we have are easy to maneuver around, and I think in their design, like she asked about the ergonomics, yes, they are safe for even female, and I think she's part of, she can witness that she can operate all the equipment well. So the equipment that we now have, I think, have no issues. Have the safety for both male and female, and they can be operated because most of them are comfortable and are hydraulical operated. So it's no longer that challenge. We have a program that we are currently, a project that we are jointly implementing with FAO and RAB on sustainable agriculture mechanization, where we train technicians, farmers, and stakeholders. But we intentionally select female and male, and just to prove that even female aged, they can operate the equipment. And they've really changed their mindset that yes, it's been a mindset that these equipment are meant for male, uh, but it's not the case.
Mm. Yeah, honestly, like you said, people have been to Lika can witness that. We can also be able to do so. I think even when we are doing the driving license for tractors, I think it was easy for everyone who were all given opportunities. So there is always gender involvement, and that's a really good thing to appreciate. So I don't know, Topist, if there's any point that I probably might have missed that you wanted to emphasize in your question.
Thank you so much. Well, the reason I raised these issues, many farmers in rural area, they do not have those big machines which are very easy to use. They do have those small mechanization machines that still require effort, like those threshers and those spraying machines they use, which are very heavy to carry. Others they complain about the threshers which are more mechanical. Still, there is no design for women to operate easily. They still require the energies, the effort to engage, things like that. So many women in rural areas they still complain that mechanization is for those men with much power. Yeah, that's why I was asking that. Yes, as from Rika, we know it's easy and we can operate as women, but it's difficult to show them that it is possible when there is no, like, when even me require more effort to operate that. What I wanted to ask Tarema is, like, is there any design people are thinking to be like fit with the women in rural areas? Because much people who do agriculture in rural areas are women. Yeah, is there any design which are being developed so that can be easily operated by women?
And that comes back to the appropriate technologies. Yes, there are those equipment that are really hard to operate even for men, but also have equipment that are easy to operate. And it all comes back to the selection of appropriate equipment. The modern ones are kind of improved because they think of ergonomics and inclusiveness during the design, but slightly expensive. So you find those that are already existing with farmers in rural areas, they are the old version that are really mechanical. And so it's a question of appropriate equipment during maybe the acquisition. We find it's challenging that sometimes even when purchasing the equipment for the farmers, some extension agents or maybe some donors do not think about the inclusiveness and ergonomics of all those equipment. But yeah, if that's thought about, they are equipment that can be easily operated by the female and the elderly inclusive. But you're right, yeah, that challenge still exists.
And let's hope that as years goes by, it will get to improve as policies get to be adjusted. Name Martin. She's saying, good evening. What role will local innovation and local manufacturing play in reducing the cost of farm machines for smallholder farmers? You probably might have talked about it, Dr. Sarima, but I think we can briefly talk about it again on how the cost of these machines can be reduced for smallholder farmers.
So the first thing, if the equipment is locally manufactured, in most cases it's tested on the ground and redesigned again and again until it suits the local terrain. But the biggest cost of the equipment is not the acquisition cost, like most of us understand, but it's the operating cost, the spare parts, the maintenance. So in most cases, we find you have an equipment imported, but when it breaks down, it's hard to find the spare parts. It's hard to find someone who is really trained to maintain or repair the equipment. So the local manufacturing one, when it's locally manufactured, one, it eases the acquisition rather than wait a few months to order the equipment, it's local available. Two, when you need spare parts, anytime it's available just within the location. But also because it's locally manufactured, it can easily be repaired. So that brings the cost down because you might acquire an equipment even when it's cheap, maybe from Asia. But even a single bolt, when it's broken, you wait for 3 months to get a replacement. And that cost is very huge compared even to the acquisition cost. So for locally manufactured equipment, you can have them within a few hours. So that brings the cost of using the equipment, it brings it down.
Thank you, Tarima, for good in response and highlighting on some of the equipment that are being imported from outside Africa. Even it imposes high costs, as it is understood, revenues. But also, I think if we could try to go for the ones locally made, if they can align with the production that you want to do, I think it would be the best thing to use the cost of production, as Dr. Terema just advised us. So I want to take this moment and appreciate everyone. And before I close, I want to ask John Bosco Terema if you have like a conclusion remarks for us or key notes that you would like to give us as we close.
Maybe just a brief one. Mechanization is for everyone. We all depend on our farmers. The smallholder farmers supply, I think, over 90% of the required food for Africa. So it's our duty to assist. Like I earlier said, we are all part of the mechanization ecosystem from extension. Some of us may be service providers, but in most cases, the only challenge is the appropriate information on appropriate mechanization. So we can, if we disseminate appropriate information, I think we shall contribute to adoption of sustainable mechanization that is affordable and that reduces environmental degradation for our farmers. Yeah, basically, thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Taremwa. I want to say thank you so much for your time and for sharing your knowledge and experience with the audience. So this is the end to Cultivate Africa session today. And this is our last session of this year. And we are hoping to see you again for Cultivate Africa within next year. We shall get to communicate through our social media platform. Feel free to follow us on Share Screen Africa social media platforms. That's where you can get more information about upcoming events and the plan that we have for you. So thank you everyone who has joined now. It was a pleasure to host you tonight. Thank you, Dr. Remwa, and thank you, the audience at large. Have a great evening.